Edwina the aardvark was a shy creature who thought that her looks were not her best feature. Her ears, they stuck out like an elephant's do, and she hated her skin because it was blue. She read magazines full of models in colour. That didn't help much, it just made her feel duller. She envied the lion his beautiful mane. It made her own hair look terribly plain. Her eyes, she thought, were piggy and small. And like a giraffe, she'd rather be tall. She wanted the legs of an elegant horse, and dainty, cute feet for dancing, of course. She longed for eyelashes like a young calf, and wanted her nose reduced by half. The list was enormous. She wrote it out twice, all of the things that she'd change to look nice. Her mum came for dinner and found the list in a jar. She told her poor daughter, "You're sweet as you are." But Edwina decided to do something drastic. She'd go to a doctor who'd change her with plastic. "Don't try to stop me," the young aardvark said. Then she ran from the house with a bag on her head. Her mum grabbed her coat and ran after her daughter, but she jumped in a taxi and Mum never caught her. Edwina arrived at the doctor's door. Her appointment was set at 4:30. She knew at once she was in the right place, for everyone else had a bag on their face. The waiting room was filled with creatures who, just like Edwina, hated their features. The elephant wanted a cute mouse's nose instead of a trunk that looked like a hose. The giraffe thought her neck was terribly long and was sure Mother Nature had got it all wrong. Each animal envied what each other had, and that made Edwina feel terribly sad, for she thought they all looked nice as they were, and the animals thought the same about her. Then the doctor called Edwina in. He sat at his desk, stroking his chin. "What can I do for you?" he said. "And please take that bag from off your head." The bag came off. She stood revealed. Their eyes, they met. Their fates were sealed. They were in love from that day on. All thoughts of change completely gone. The doctor, you see, saw beauty within, the kind that lives beyond the skin. So now Edwina is no longer shy. She married the doctor, and can you guess why? It's true he was handsome. It's true he was dark. But what really swung it? He was an aardvark. Some creatures are great, some creatures are small. Some animals thin, and some of them tall. Everyone's different. It's nothing to hide. For happiness comes from what's felt inside. This is a sloth, and this is his wife, and these are his children, the loves of his life. The younger they are, the cuter they get. And here is WIN-STANLEY, the smallest one yet. For the sloth is the laziest creature you meet, and WIN-STANLEY was lazy from his head to his feet. Albert the elephant passed by one day, and the sloth family tree stood right in his way. An elephant's big, but has tiny eyes, and what happened next should be no surprise. Albert bumped into the tree with a whack, and WIN-STANLEY fell down onto Albert's broad back. But Albert the elephant had a very thick hide, and he never guessed he'd a sloth for a ride. WIN-STANLEY said nothing. Too lazy to speak, he stayed for the journey that lasted a week. The jungle was great. It was big, wet and green, and filled full of creatures our sloth hadn't seen. Thirsty at last from his stomping around, Albert relaxed by a river he'd found. As he knelt on his knees and dipped in his trunk, WIN-STANLEY slid down with a whoosh and kerplunk. Albert the elephant was too busy drinking to see that WIN-STANLEY was lazily sinking. Back on the tree, his mother looked round. She looked at the branch. She looked at the ground. She counted her children hung under the tree and said, "Now, that's funny. I thought we had 3. Meanwhile, in the river, her son's eyes opened wide, for the sight he took in beat the elephant ride. WIN-STANLEY was sinking past bright-coloured fish, the type you don't see with chips on a dish. They were stripy and red and yellow and green, the prettiest sight WIN-STANLEY had seen. He'd now held his breath for a minute or more when a hippo called Jeff pushed him up to the shore. A bird on Jeff's head flew the sloth through the sky, up over the jungle to help his fur dry. WIN-STANLEY looked down at the rivers and plants, and all of the creatures as tiny as ants. He'd never seen anything quite like this view. It beat swimming with fish by 100 times 2. They stopped on a tree where the bird has his nest, and WIN-STANLEY hung under at the branch for a rest. WIN-STANLEY looked up. He wasn't alone, for here were his family. WIN-STANLEY was home. He'd had an adventure that couldn't compare. He'd been under the water and flown in the air. He'd seen all the hustle and bustle and tussle, and he'd done all of this without moving a muscle. Camilla the camel felt like a frump. She hated her looks on account of her hump. Whatever she wore, it never hung right. She thought that she looked a peculiar sight. Now, every year, a big summer ball was held in the grounds of the Tangier Town Hall. Camilla just dreaded this annual event, for all of the fashionable animals went. They looked fine, so chic and smart. She felt quite dowdy, no work of art. The mayor announced the date of the ball. He told them, "This year's the most special of all. A handsome young count with a top pedigree will open our party without charging a fee. The whole town must come all dressed in their best and show off in front of our special young guest." Camilla was filled with dismay and despair. "Oh, Mother," she wailed, "I've got nothing to wear." They went to the shops. No dress could be found to go over or under her wobbly mound. But when a crisis occurs, all mothers know best, and Camilla's mother rose to the test. She purchased some curtains with big polka dots and cut them to fit round the difficult spots. The result was unusual, not fashionable at all. But her mum said, "You'll be quite the belle of the ball." When Camilla arrived, she stood to one side. In her silly old frock, she just wanted to hide. But the mayor had news for the folks of the town. Our Count is not coming. His car's broken down. He's stuck in the desert, a long way from here. If we cannot help him, we're countless, I fear. Any ideas? Said the mayor, looking around. The desert is dangerous. The Count must be found. Camilla stepped forward, saying, I'll have a go. I'm built for the desert, as I'm sure you must know. For miles I can travel without water or rest, so I, Camilla, will rescue our guest. The crowd, they all cheered as Camilla drank. Her hump filled up like a great water tank. Then off she sloshed, to the desert she bound. A brave little camel, she didn't look round. She travelled for hours through a sandstorm. The sun, it beat down. It was jolly warm. At last she heard a loud, angry voice from under the hood of a shiny Rolls Royce. How do you do? Camilla said, which surprised the Count. He banged his head. It was so funny, they both just laughed. The Count admitted he felt quite daft. They galloped and laughed, the stars shone above. By the time they got back, they had fallen in love. They danced at the party, to cheers and applause. The Count told Camilla, I'm totally yours. Soon after that, they married in style. And Camilla is happy, she can't help but smile. So life is bliss, and Camilla's a star. For the Count often tells her, you're perfect, you are. Pointy the Hedgehog hated the autumn. When leaves left the trees, his spiky bits caught him. Pointy the Hedgehog hated the winter, for snow tends to go where it shouldn't get into. He tried to wear clothes, but Pointy looked daft. His spines just made holes and let in a draft. So as our tale starts, Pointy packed up his things and headed for sleep before winter begins. For like lots of creatures since the dawn of creation, Pointy slept through the winter. It's called hibernation. But Pointy was late and received a cruel shock. Someone had blocked up his hole with a rock. Let me in, let me in. Who's stolen my bed? Then Bernard the bear looked out and he said, You've left it too late. You'll have to be quick. Besides, you're a hedgehog and bears get first pick. With that, the big bear rolled the stone back in place, leaving Pointy outside with his nightcap and case. Where do I go? Thought Pointy with dread. I'll try a hotel. They might have a spare bed. So off Pointy trotted to a 4-star hotel. At the door was a dormouse with a sad tale to tell. There's just the royal suite, but that's booked in advance by a queen bee called Beatrice, who's arriving from France. Try the old squirrel. She's called Mrs. Rogers. For a bag full of nuts, she's been known to take lodgers. So off Pointy went as snow started to fall. But old Mrs. Rogers was no help at all. I never take hedgehogs. It's on all my signs. You'll ruin the sheets on account of your spines. So off Pointy trudged through cold wind and snow, a sad little hedgehog with nowhere to go. He sat under a tree with tears on his face that turned into ice drops and bounced off his case. Pointy felt all alone, which wasn't quite true, for a red-breasted robin chirped, How do you do? I've had better days, said Pointy, upset. I should be asleep, not out in the wet. But snow is the best. It's fluffy and fun. Let's make a snowman. I'll show how it's done. So they made 20 snowmen, then had a sleigh race. They even threw snowballs, but not in the face. Pointy got all excited. There was so much to do. Robin taught him to skate. Then they made an igloo. To think I've been missing the best season of all, tucked up in my bed in a small spiky ball. But a year has 4 seasons, the way nature planned. So the snow had to go as spring warmed the land. The snowmen and igloo gave way to the sun, and the hedgehog and Robin knew their season was done. Pointy yawned sad goodbyes and hugged his friend near and promised to see him the same time next year. Then all of the bees and badgers and bears left the hotels and came out of their lairs, except for one hedgehog who thinks winter's neat and sleeps through the summer in the empty royal suite. Magpies are famous for picking up litter, especially the pieces that sparkle and glitter. And Maurice the magpie was the best of the best. Just look at the rubbish he kept in his nest. Gold wrappers and trinkets, he just couldn't stop. His nest was a mountain with a family on top. This was great fun for both of his kids. They'd slide down the side on bottle-top lids. But Doris, his wife, said, "Enough is enough. You've messed up the nest with all of your stuff. If you carry on adding to this frightful display, you'll soon lose the lot, for the branch will give way." "You're right," said Maurice. "Leave it to me. We'll move somewhere larger. How about the oak tree?" So that's what they did, but oh, what a mess. Poor Doris the magpie liked this place even less. Gold chocolate wrappers were stuck to the wall, and old bottle tops were stacked in the hall. Marbles were rolling all over the floor. Lemonade can rings were blocking the door. Doris was desperate. It's just got to stop. I don't want to see one more bottle top. Poor Maurice the magpie loved his collection, but he loved his wife more and understood her objection. Word spread through the wood, and soon it was known that Maurice the magpie was clearing his home. A line of red ants marched up the tree and carried away all they could see. A squirrel took most of his old silver foil to wrap up his nuts to hide in the soil. By the end of the day, nothing was there. The collection was gone. The treehouse was bare. "That's better," said Doris. "Now we've got space." She polished and dusted all over the place. But Maurice was sad, he had to confess. He missed all the sparkly, glittery mess. And after a week, even Maurice's wife felt that the sparkle had gone from her life. Both of their children thought, "What can we do?" Then they came up with a plan, and off they both flew. Without their folks knowing, they searched high and low for all of the things their dad had let go. You may think it naughty to behave in this way, but the 2 little birds just giggled all day. That night, their parents flew back to the tree. The children were hoping they'd like what they'd see. Well, what a surprise! Big smiles lit their faces. The collection was back in smart display cases. There were marbles in jars, not under your feet, and buttons on shelves, looking ever so neat. "My collection looks great," said Dad, full of glee, and Mum by his side couldn't help but agree. She was very impressed, loving all that she saw. She even told Maurice to go and find more. So always remember, it's far more worthwhile if you have a collection to present it in style. Felicia the hummingbird was late once again. I promised to visit with Molly the wren. What time is it now? 2:30. Oh, no. I told her I'd be there an hour ago. She zoomed between bushes. She whizzed past the trees. She outran the squirrels and outbuzzed the bees. Felicia flew up to her friend's little nest, where Molly sat calmly awaiting her guest. Felicia said, "Sorry, so sorry I'm late. 1:30, I know we'd made it a date. But do you think we might change it to 5:15? I've a meeting right now with a hamster called Clive." Felicia gave Molly a peck on the cheek, and then off she flew before Molly could speak. She whizzed off to Clive, skimming over the river. There he sat waiting with some cookies to give her. He started to greet her, but quickly she stopped him. She turned round and said, "Clive, I know I've just dropped in, but sorry, got to run. I've forgotten a chore. I'll be back in 10 minutes and we'll visit some more." Felicia the hummingbird, as you can see, packed more into one day than the busiest bee. Though kind and considerate and very good-hearted, she'd never once finished whatever she'd started. There were more friends to visit, more places to go. She'd not seen a sunset. They happened too slow. Now, as she was nearing her grandmother's tree, Felicia asked, "Didn't Grandma want something from me? I'm sure Grandma asked me this morning to bring her something, but what was that thing? What was it she asked for? What could it have been? And I told her I'd bring it by 3:17. She remembered too late the big tree up ahead. She couldn't avoid it and hit it instead. Unhurt, but quite dizzy, she lay on the ground. It forced her to stop. And you know what she found? A snail, small and round, creeping so slowly past her. Felicia said, "Hey, can't you go any faster?" The snail said, "Why hurry? A slow life sublime. It's better to savor one thing at a time. Today, cross the path. Tomorrow, enjoy a lovely long visit with my brother's new boy." Felicia thought as she lay by the tree, "His life seems so happy, but he does less than me." Well, then she tried it. Felicia the hummingbird stopped, and in that small moment, a little thought dropped. Nectar, sweet nectar, that's what Grandma'd requested. I remembered as soon as I stopped and I rested. She turned to her new friend, the snail so slow, and said to him, "Thank you. You've taught me, you know. From now on, no speeding, no frantic forgetting. I might even stop to enjoy the sun setting." And that very day, that's just what she did. She sat with her grandma as the sun slowly hid. They sighed and they talked as the daylight grew frail, and then someone joined them, the leisurely snail. They all sat together in Grandmother's nest and sipped nectar slowly, as that way was best.